Please take your seats quickly, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Tennis Weekly with Joel and Kim, sponsored by DownloadTennis.com. On today's Billie Jean King Cup Day 3 catch-up,
GB do the impossible.
Leylah Fernandez opens her bakery.
And talk of tough scheduling dominates the press room.
Chris, today is the 11th of November and we are here to catch up on Day 3 of the Billie Jean King Cup finals in Glasgow at Tennis Weekly HQ. It has been a very eventful, a historic day even for Great Britain yesterday. Fantastic day of tennis, and who would have thought it ending up in GB's first appearance in the semi-finals of the Billie Jean King Cup, Fed Cup, whatever you want to call it, since 1981. Did you really think that was going to happen?
I would say no, and I'd also like to start this episode by issuing a public apology to Harriet Dart for questioning whether she should be playing against Paula Badosa, because clearly she should be, and we were completely wrong. But one area we were slightly right on was that Heather Watson was a great number 2. So did I think it would happen? No. Did I think we could edge the win with the second singles and the doubles? Yes.
For me, all the answers were no. I was like, Heather Watson coming in. I mean, she was injured. She was telling us in press conference she was injured like a couple of weeks ago. So I was a little bit kind of nervous there. Harriet Dart against Badosa. I mean, it's got to be said, Badosa played shockingly. I don't really understand how within like 24 hours, the tennis she was playing against Rybakina to the tennis she was dishing out against Harriet Dart, for me, the difference was just completely night and day.
Yeah, it really was. I think with Badosa, she has talked about how she does struggle sometimes with the mental side of the game. And I think yesterday when she did a press conference after that result against Kazakhstan, she said she was very relieved that Diaz had put them 1-0 up. And obviously this was a very different situation where it was theirs to lose. And potentially that pressure didn't necessarily translate in a great way for her on the court. But take nothing away from Harriet Dart. She took the ball on early. And when Badosa was playing well in points, Badosa was not winning those points. Harriet Dart was coming up with something special that was really at the top of her level. But I do think looking at the match yesterday, it was not the same Paula Badosa that we saw. And it begs the question as to why she's able to perform against some of the top players, but really can't bring her best game against players that, as Harriet Dart said herself, should be easily beating her. I was quite shocked, but amazed by the level from Harriet.
And, it was a situation for me, it was quite interesting because it really was backs against the wall stuff. I think Anne Kjofevong used those exact terms after the tie. And, going into it, knowing, what you need to do, 3-0 whitewash. Yeah, not very easy. And we talk about the singles and Harriet Dart putting on a great performance. We also had Heather Watson come in for Katie Boulter. We still don't really know if that was tactical or if that was due to injury concerns, but you could just see how much fun and how much enjoyment, I think, and pleasure that Heather Watson takes from playing for her country, because she came out like she meant business. And Parisa Diaz, bless her, she had no idea. She had no answer to what Heather was throwing at her.
Yeah, I think it was a very different Heather. As we saw her walk onto the court, she was really up for it. She was relaxed. She was smiling. It wasn't sort of the same Heather that is almost focused and wants it to the point of not being able to play some of her best tennis sometimes on the bigger stages at Wimbledon. So I think this match was super impressive because she was not at all inhibited by the moment or the pressure or what she had to do. She was just up for the challenge. She went for it and she did not blink. And I think we've all seen from Heather in the past that sometimes she's not the best closer of matches and has a superb set and then can't get it done. In this one, it just got better and better.
I was waiting for that moment to happen and it didn't arrive.
It didn't. It didn't. It really didn't. She just motored through it. And she loved every second out there, she said, and it showed on the court.
Exactly. And I think for her, this will definitely go down as probably one of the moments of her season. She's had a few, highs. I'm thinking about that great run at Wimbledon. And, she said in press conference afterwards, she didn't feel like it's necessarily been reflected in her ranking, the successes she's had this season. And I think, this matchup against Parisas Diaz, we were watching it live. Again, it just shows to me like there's not really much difference when you get further down the rankings, I think, between a player like Parisas Diaz, who I think is ranked inside the top 100, around 70, 80 in the world, versus a Heather Watson who's ranked just outside the top 100. It really shows, I think, that you don't necessarily have to take rankings into account with these matches, because the tie, the atmosphere, the pressure can all have an impact in a way that you just look at it on paper and you might think, yeah, that person starts as favourite. Well, Heather Watson proved that wrong, and then Harriet Dart proved that wrong as well.
I mean, completely. And I think everyone spoke about it in press that it doesn't matter what your ranking is. It's about getting that win, the W next to your name for your country. And how inspired people are and how people really relish the opportunity of playing for their country, and add in a home tie and add in a bonus feature here after the Russian Tennis Federation obviously was removed from the competition, having lost way back in April over in Prague in the Czech Republic, 3-2 to being in the semi-finals. I mean, it's an unbelievable story. And
we're like a
favourite.
lucky loser. We're like a lucky loser on the tour. We do have those stories sometimes come around on the tour when lucky losers go out in qualifying and then end up winning the whole tournament. And it really feels like at the moment GB is in that lucky loser sort of spot, aren't they? Because as you said, they lost in qualifying. They were granted a reprieve given they're hosting the event, and they're absolutely making the most of it.
We're on borrowed time and we're playing like it. I think it's everything is a bonus. And I was going to say podcast favourite of Barnett and Nichols. I mean, they are loving every second. They didn't play, obviously, in that match in April. So had this occasion not happened in this way and been in Glasgow, they wouldn't be having some of the biggest wins and some of the best moments of their careers to date. So making the most of every opportunity is really a theme for GB here.
Absolutely. And as you said, Barnett and Nichols, although the tie in theory was over because we had won it at 2-0 after the singles, we needed Barnett and Nichols to come out firing and complete the whitewash. So there was still, added pressure there. And they came up against Bolsova and Masarova. Great first set. I thought it really hung on that tie break, very, very close, and then closing it out 6-2, in the second set. But as you said, they must be absolutely loving life at the moment, almost dreamlike, helping GB to a semi-final. For me, what was quite interesting, again, talking to them afterwards and talking about the different pathways into tennis and how they, see themselves as late bloomers. One has come from a British university, one has come from an American university in terms of their kind of trajectory and journey. But again, they've just shown that I think anything is possible if you put your mind to it. And actually in tennis, particularly I think in the women's game, you don't necessarily have to start tennis at such a young age and dedicate your life to it. You can get life experiences elsewhere, and actually you can reap the benefits of that. And I think we're really kind of seeing that at the moment with Barnett and Nichols and how they're prospering this season on the tour, but also in this environment in the GB setup.
Yeah, and the benefit that they've brought to the court is more than just the play. It's also the fresh blood to the team. Kind of, they're not completely institutionalized in the sense of having been through the system since they were 16. They really are inspired by the fact that they think that the best years of their tennis are still ahead of them, which I also believe, based on this win, that next year they're going to have a great double season. And it feels like because they've had that life outside, which Anne also talked about, it's really helped them on the court. And I think we've seen so many players who burn out or aren't able to kind of maintain their passion and intensity for the sport. These girls are the absolute opposite of that. They're just as passionate as they've ever been, and I think that they're only going to enjoy being on life on tour and playing for GB in the future even more as every year comes by.
I did enjoy in the press conference. It was always a struggle at times to hear them because they had lost their voice from all the energy, cheering on their team, playing out there. So it's quite funny how they were just like getting through the press conference, but their voices were a little strained. But it was a fantastic performance, and a fantastic performance as well. We must say by Anne Kjofevong, because we were debating: would you keep Barnett and Nichols for the doubles, or would you bring in a Heather Watson or a Harriet Dart based on based on the performances they had just given, they would have been relatively fresh given the nature of their results. So, Anne Kjoffervong, to her credit, held her nerve, stuck with Barnett and Nichols, and they delivered.
I think she's done a fantastic job in terms of selection. I think bringing the doubles pair, which was obviously very, very late notice, I think it's something that's recognising the nature of how this tournament is. And most teams do not have a doubles pair that they both play for the same country, that play on the tour week in, week out. And we talked about it in the last podcast. It's in those clutch moments. If you have two players that play together, they know exactly what they're going to do. They train together in a tie break like they had in the first set. In those clutch moments, there are no surprises, and the chemistry is undeniable. So I think it was really smart. I think sticking with them. I was thinking if Badosa plays, would you mix it up? Because obviously Dart and Watson are seeing the ball like a football tonight. Would you mix it up? But even if that had have happened, I do think that she made the right decision. And I thought, actually, at the time, I thought maybe you might remove them just because of the fact that it's a very different situation of going from playing to survive to playing where you have to deliver, which is probably the highest pressure situation they've been in that first set. Yeah. And there were times when lots and lots of close points, and I think you were looking at the stats yesterday, and they were so good on break points. So credit to them and credit to Kjoffervong.
Yeah, I think they saved 6 out of 7 break points, and that for me was really
so
the
impressive
difference in terms, of how relatively inexperienced, but they just were able to handle those pressure moments a lot better than their opponents. And GB will come up in the semi-finals against Australia, who confirmed their presence in the semis, defeating Belgium 3-0. We had Storm Sanders, who seems to be as we talked about before, the secret weapon of Australia at the moment, playing in the singles and the doubles. She beat Alison van Uytvanck 6-2, 6-2. Then we had Tomljanovic defeat Mertens. Unfortunately, Mertens had to retire in that third set, 3-love down. And we had also Storm Sanders and Sammy Souza coming in for Ellen Perez, winning in the doubles. I mean, what do you make of that tie, GB versus Australia? Because Australia also have very handy doubles players there. They might not necessarily be a partnership on the tour, but Sanders, Grand Slam doubles champion, Stozer, also a Grand Slam doubles champion. It's going to be a very interesting battle. For me, it's going to be really important around that singles match, particularly, I think, against Storm Sanders. Yeah,
the number 2 singles is going to be imperative. I think it will be a great matchup. Certainly it's winnable, which I think is, if you look at the other teams that could be going through to semi-finals, would I back us against a potential Canada or potential Switzerland? Probably not. But against Australia, they are also a similar team where they play their team in the right way to get the results. They were super smart last year in terms of some of their selection, where they actually had Storm play number 1 singles previously. So they're also flexible with what they do. They understand the nature of this tournament and the nature of how it works. So it's winnable, but it does really depend on who those matchups are. And I think the doubles were really strong. I think the second singles were really strong. And I think anything can happen in that first singles. So
Storm Sanders is on a high, this season. You spoke to her afterwards, and it really came apparent to me, what a roller coaster kind of she's been on in terms of emotions.
Yeah,
over the
it was amazing, Joel. Speaking to her, because I asked her, because I remember watching in qualification in 2021, I think it was, for Adelaide. I'd never seen her play before. And she got through to the semi-final, the quarterfinals there before she lost to Bencic. And so I just asked her the question in press about the journey she's been through over the last couple of seasons. And I think she really has had time to process on it, because obviously winning the US Open was so recent. The singles, she reached a career high as well. And now she reached career high of number 8 in the world. So it's kind of one of those stories where a player, it's very similar, I'd say, to Barnett and Nichols, where I think she was 26 when she played in Adelaide. So quite late to be kind of breaking onto the WTA Tour, and just look what she's achieved and what she's achieved for her country. So she did get a bit emotional on that one. So I think it was clearly it's a moment for her, and this semi-final is going to be really competitive.
Yeah, I agree. And it's great that the organisers, they've announced some £20 tickets to go on sale. So I'm really hoping there's going to be a great atmosphere. It has to be said, the atmosphere was, I think, a lot better from the GB support for this tie versus the Kazakhstan tie. So, hopefully we can keep that up. I mean, elsewhere, we had in Group A, Canada defeat Italy 3-0. Andreescu beating Cocciaretto 7-6, 6-3. Fernandez double bageling Martina Trevisan, which we'll get onto in a sec, 6-love, 6-love, and then Dabrowski and Fernandez winning in the doubles. Now, we spoke about kind of scheduling. We know this is an issue and a challenge with the Billie Jean King Cup. Belgium haven't been particularly happy. We've been in some very weird situations where teams have gone out before other teams have even kind of started their tournament, and Canada are one of these teams who, they only had their first match yesterday, but again, they looked very, very very impressive, didn't they?
Yeah, super impressive. On that point of the scheduling, I think we should probably make a mention for Belgium that they were almost scheduled out of this tournament, in the sense that obviously
they definitely felt like they were the hardest done by, didn't they?
Yeah, and I think it's because Elise Mertens, being a top doubles player, didn't kind of get the attention that you might need if you're a singles player or a singles strong nation in terms of the scheduling, because as you say, like, she played her first match at 10 a.m. on the Wednesday, and then they had another 10 a.m. the next day, whereas Canada still hadn't played yet. So I think some of the teams here will be helped by the scheduling, Czech Republic as well, that we'll come on to. But I did feel in that Bianca match that the scheduling for Italy, that really was a struggle, because Conchevetta played Teichmann in over 3 hours, less than 24 hours before she went on to play against Bianca, knowing that they had to win 3-0. So I think
it's a tough spot to be in, isn't it?
It's so tough. And she got to 5-2, and she was obviously running on empty, where she was hitting and having to go for so much more, and there's only so long you can play that before the reality of someone like Bianca Andreescu, who can go long matches, she can make it difficult. And I think it was probably the exhaustion of the previous day's efforts and playing against a player who's rock solid like Bianca that really did her in there. So looking forward to Switzerland versus Canada, because both of those teams I think will be pretty fresh, because no one spent that much time on the court today for Canada, did they?
No, I think that's going to be an excellent tie. I mean, we again spoke with Bianca Andreescu after her match, after her victory. I loved how she called her the fans supporting Canada here. She called them her cheerleaders, which I absolutely loved. They were here in force. I was a little bit surprised, because there's not really been that kind of much American presence, I'd say. They've been having to kind of make do with their own instruments to bring their own atmosphere within the team. But certainly the Canadian team can rely on their fans to bring a bit of atmosphere. I love they were on the beers at like 11 a.m. as well.
It was like 11:15, wasn't it, Joel?
It was great. It was great on the Velodrome court. So they really kind of did, add something. And I do think Canada are going to be like a force to be reckoned with. But just talking about on Andreescu, I thought what was quite interesting was she was very confident in her press conference afterwards about talking about some of the struggles she's had this year, but also looking forward to next year. And she was pretty clear in terms of her goal, wasn't she? She wants to be back in the top 10 in 2023.
Yeah, I think this year she kind of talked about the fact it was more kind of not trying to rush it or set too many expectations too soon. Almost the preparation for 2023 being a big season. She says she feels kind of happy with her game. She feels good mentally and physically, and she knows that she's playing like great tennis, but she thinks there's areas she can improve on. So I really hope, because I said this before on the pod, but when we had Osaka, Barty, and we had Andreescu at the end of season finals, I thought this is going to be such a great couple of years of tennis, and it's been such a shame. It's been such a shame, hasn't it?
It's been so fragmented, and we've never really got those rivalries going. There's been, some here, some there, but yeah, it's been almost kind of a little bit frustrating. And I know it almost feels at the moment we're sort of still waiting for those kind of stars to align, but hopefully maybe 2023 is the time that I think
it's Bianca's year. I should have put her in my end of season finals. Sorry, Bianca.
Okay.
I should have. She's confident. Fernandez, though, I couldn't believe that.
Yeah, double bagel, super, super quick time. Trevisan wasn't even doing her kind of trademark grunting, throughout the match.
By Fernandez.
It was just impeccable tennis from Fernandez. Trevisan didn't really have an answer. And I'm not going to lie, Chris, I was watching it and I was just thinking, Martina Trevisan, Grand Slam semi-finalists, worlds apart from what I was seeing on the court.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say as long as we have an indoor Billie Jean King Cup finals, a clay court nation has zero chance. And I think it makes sense as to why Trevisan wasn't picked to play against Switzerland, because clearly her game of slow clay court play does not do well on a fast indoor court. Hasn't got the biggest serve, but I do think that despite that, you should be able to pick up some games. On the defence, I would say in 2019, Garcia did lose to Ash Barty, 6-love, in a Billie Jean King Cup, then the Fed Cup tie. So sometimes some crazy things can happen in these sorts of events that wouldn't normally happen on the tour, because Trevisan was playing some great tennis in the very quick outdoor Guadalajara. So you have to feel bad for her, because that is a pretty humiliating defeat. But Fernandez was on one.
Yeah, I know. I think it sets up Canada very, very well. I think they're going to be one of the. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if they go all the way. If I'm being honest, seeing their atmosphere, I feel like they've got a little bit of swagger as well. Like they've come in here, they
cool
mean
customers.
business. And I love the red jackets.
A double
as well.
specialist.
They've got a double specialist. They've got Tennis Weekly favourite Gabby Dabrowski in their corner as well. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how they go. I mean, the final match we did have yesterday, Czech Republic versus Poland. Czech Republic defeating Poland 2-1. Mukova defeated Frech. Magda Linette defeating Karolina Pliskova 6-4, 6-1, and then Siniakova Vondrousova, no Barbora Krejcikova, winning in the doubles. So, I mean, it was an interesting tie. Again, Karolina Pliskova, disappointing from her. Magda Linette, I've been singing her praises this week, and I feel like I've been further vindicated by her performance against Pliskova, who, again, didn't necessarily have some answers, and was, I think, a little bit fortunate that her kind of compatriots, Mukova, and then, Siniakova and Vondrousova were able to get it done when, she wasn't able to get it over the line.
Yeah, I think Magda Linette, kind of the surprise package of this tournament in terms of the singles. In her press conference pre-tournament starting, obviously the attention was on the fact that Iga wasn't here. And she made it clear she plays against top 20 girls on the tour all the time. She's not going to be surprised by people's level. And I think she had a point to prove. And so the question that I sort of have from this is, if Iga had been here, would she have been able to play as well and get some of these wins? Because it feels like she's making a point to everyone who thinks that Poland is a single-player country, that their number two can do some serious damage on the international stage. And she dismantled Pliskova, which I think none of us were expecting.
No, and for me, Poland is probably the nation I'm like, if they did have Świątek, they very much could have, they're for me are like what could have been the most kind of what could have been country, given what we've seen at the moment, and given the potential of if they were having someone like an Iga Świątek in their corner.
On that point, Joel, so we've talked a lot about Iga not being here, and from the players that have come over, I kind of feel like she probably was making the right decision, because it has been so tough on the players, especially with Elise Mertens and the injury, and some of the turnarounds for some of these players. Siniakova obviously had a bit of a break, and then playing a doubles in the evening. A couple of days later, it's a bit different, but you do feel like it would probably have been a real, not necessarily a down moment, but it wouldn't have been a sensible, from a mental or a physical perspective. It would be.
I mean, to be honest, that's why I have tremendous respect for Elise Mertens.
Completely.
Making the trip, putting herself out on the court. Maybe she didn't even feel like she was 100%, against Tomjanovic, playing the doubles as well. Because, for me, Mertens and Świątek, that's probably the most kind of like-for-like comparison in terms of a player who decided to go and a player who kind of didn't. And maybe Świątek is looking at Mertens and seeing that retirement and thinking, actually, for my own personal benefit, I think I made the right decision. But it's still a tricky one. I still think like the sway of being in the team setup and playing with your compatriots, which doesn't happen that often, I think is a really compelling factor, particularly I think for nations where they want to kind of play with their friends that maybe during the tour they might be playing against them. So
yeah, completely. I get that point a lot, and I think when you also look at the teams, and this is another point on Iga not playing, is the fact that Iga would be playing in doubles and singles, and she would genuinely feel bad if she wasn't, because she would know that she needs to play that, and that's what Lynette's been doing. And when they haven't had, when they have kind of pushed a tie to 1-1, the doubles is a bit of a non-event because they don't have the doubles play in Poland for that in their team. So I think it does also make the point that if Iga was able to have a team where there were kind of a few more rotations they could do, then it might be something that would be viable for her. But I think if you are the number one player like Mertens for your team, it's very different with Siniaka, obviously. It's double duty, and that has double duty every 24 hours. Sometimes less than 24 hours. So, yeah. And we asked the question to Switzerland, who wouldn't give us an answer about whether they were going to be rotating players. And they are, if we look ahead to tomorrow. So they have put Golubic in, which I think is really interesting in terms of, even though Teichmann and Bencic are obviously the top players, they still have to recognise that you have to maintain your body and maintain your fitness and maintain the level of kind of exhaustion, I guess, of the team. You have to account for that, that you do have to be able to rotate to be able to come home with the title, I believe.
So Switzerland, they're not a 2-person team. They're a 3-person team. They're a 3-person team.
Yeah.
I mean, just before we end the episode, as you say, we've got Switzerland, Canada, Czech Republic, USA. I'm going to put you on the spot here. Who is going to be in... We've got GB and Australia in the first semi-final. Who is making that second semi-final?
That is a great question. I think that today it's going to come down to the doubles for both. I think that Canada are going to come through in the doubles. I think that Lena Fernandez and Gabi Dabrowski looked incredibly good. Mm-hmm. And last year we did think Dabrowski was the standout sort of doubles player in her group from Prague.
I remember watching. I can't remember which match it was, but I remember she was on a doubles court with 3 singles players,
playing with Rebecca Marino.
Yeah, and it was just like quite clear that she was
light and day,
the standout. Yeah,
it was. And then for the US Czech match, I think that Mukova will probably get the win over number 2 against Collins potentially. I think there's going to be a bit of magic there for Mukova. And then again in the doubles, they have got options. It's going to come down to the wire. I would say the Czech Republic will edge it. I just have a feeling that it's going to get tight.
Okay. I'll hold you to that. I'm going Canada, USA. I think, again, it will come down to deciding doubles. I think Coco Gauff's also going to be a factor.
Singles.
Does she play? What does she play? Because to me, that will be, I think, a big factor in terms of that Czech Republic USA result. But we'll have to wait and see. But listeners, I hope you've enjoyed listening to this Day 3 Billie Jean King Cup Finals catch up with the Tennis Weekly podcast with me and Chris. We're going to be back tomorrow for our Day 4 catch up. So I hope you can join us for that. But in the meantime, it's goodbye from Chris.
Goodbye.
And it's goodbye from myself. We'll see you again soon.